everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Recovery Talk. Oh my god, can you hear my dog in the background? I don't know what it is, but whenever I'm recording an episode, she sleeps 20 hours a day, but as soon as I'm putting the microphone up, she starts thinking, oh yeah, a good time to start pacing around, start trying to guard the house from birds and bark, and she just chooses chaos whenever I'm recording. She's been having a bit of a beef with some local pigeons lately. They have come into our garden. How dare they? And she's been really mad at them. But yeah, no. She wants to sleep now, so let's hope it stays that way. Anyways, guys, today I wanted to discuss overwhelm and what can I say? A bit of that deer in a highlight situation that a lot of people experience when it comes to making decisions about food, right? And decision fatigue around food decisions. For example, this can happen in front of the fridge, but also very often it happens when someone is in the grocery store, right? They go to the grocery store and the intention is good. Yay, I'm gonna go there, I'm gonna buy some fear foods, I'm gonna challenge myself. And then you come there and then you just stand in front of the chocolate aisle and it's like you freeze. Again, like that deer in headlight response. Maybe you spend like half an hour just walking from aisle to aisle trying to figure out what am I going to get, right? And then you panic and you're like, oh my God, I need to get something, but I need to get the perfect thing. I don't know what I crave. What if I get something and I don't like it? On and on it goes. Oh, you thought it was just you experiencing this? Oh, no. This is so common. I would argue that this is part of the food perfectionism and food scarcity mindset. I will explain a bit why later. I have done an episode on food perfectionism and also food scarcity mindset in the past, so check that out, search it up. But now I want to talk a bit more specifically about that decision fatigue that a lot of people with eating disorders or an eating disorder recovery experience. So typical example is someone is going to challenge a fear food, let's say chocolate, right? Maybe they have a brief idea about what chocolate they're going to get before they go into the grocery store. Maybe they think, yeah, I'm going to get a Snickers bar, right? That seems nice, right? And then they enter the grocery shop and then they stand in front of the aisle and they see all the different chocolate options. And then again, they kind of freeze, right? They start thinking, oh my God, they start thinking, how is the nutritional content in different ones? Or maybe also another one that is so very common is thinking, oh, but which one do I really crave? Which one will really satisfy me? So again, this can manifest in different ways. For some people, it can be panicking and obsessing about the calorie amounts, maybe feeling, oh, I need to choose the lowest calorie or lowest in XYZ. But a lot of times it also can just manifest in, I really need to make the right decision here. I need to choose the chocolate that I really crave. And maybe even fear of choosing something new in fear that it won't be as tasty, and then part of you think, oh, I wasted that opportunity. Or a typical eating disorder thought, oh, I wasted the calories. This is a typical example of a eating disorder behavior that can camouflage as a recovery behavior, right? Being like, oh, I just want to make sure that I get the chocolate I want because I don't want to not eat what I want, right? This can quickly come out, make it seem like this is just a good intention recovery behavior, right? But then when we unpack the layers a bit, we see that what is often underlying here is a general food scarcity mindset and food perfectionism mindset. When I go to the grocery store and I grab a bar of chocolate, maybe I see, oh, it's a new chocolate bar, I want to try that, right? I just grab it without much thought. And if I don't like it, it's kind of like, okay, well, then, I might finish it even if I don't like it because I finish foods that I don't always love because that's part of being a recovered person. Food doesn't always need to be insanely rewarding to eat it, right? Sometimes we just eat because we have to, or because food is laying around, because we're bored, whatsoever. This is normal behavior. But equally, I'm not scared of accidentally buying a chocolate bar and really not liking it, right? Or it being a little bit underwhelming because I know that I can literally just go buy another one, right? And please don't get me wrong. I also understand there are people who may be really struggling financially where they may not have the chance to just go buy another chocolate bar, right? I'm not necessarily discussing like the people who do this for financial purposes. I'm talking more people who actually have the money to buy another chocolate bar. They have that extra dollar to buy that chocolate bar, but they still find themselves completely paralyzed. So what I do remember during my eating disorder and during my recovery is that I would go to the grocery store and I would spend hours trying to find the perfect bread, right? The perfect loaf of bread. And especially in the beginning of recovery, it was more a concern about the nutritional content, right? It was a concern that, oh, I need to, it needs to be like high in this and low in that, that was more the thoughts. And then later on in recovery, I noticed that I started getting the same like perfectionism, but it was more like, oh, I need this bread to be tasty and fulfilling and satisfying and perfect. The food needed to be really good, basically, in order to be quote unquote worth it, because there was a part of me that still was working with that scarcity mindset. So when you go to the grocery store and you're going to challenge that chocolate bar, there may be a part of you that is subconsciously thinking, this is my one chance to have a chocolate bar, right? Because you've kind of gotten your brain and body so used to it being a one-off or like a rare occurrence, right? So you've not shown yourself that you actually can access chocolate unlimited. And then it's like, this is my one chance, I need it to be perfect. Like, this is my one shot, so I need it to be a perfect shot. Instead of, oh, I have unlimited shots, I can just kind of trial and error a bit. So yeah, this is one example of how that overwhelm can manifest, is literally just a desire to make the perfect decision and feeling like you must choose the perfect chocolate bar that satisfies you perfectly, that is the most satisfying, that's the most tasty. Very, very common example. And I believe that the underlying thing here is, a scarcity mindset, thinking that this is your one chance. And basically putting chocolate on a pedestal where it must be perfect to be worth it. But here is the truth. You are allowed to access any kind of chocolate whenever you want. And sometimes it's going to be really tasty and sometimes it won't be. Another way I see this behavior manifest is, for example, allowing yourself, I'm going to buy chocolate, but I can't just grab a chocolate bar on the go when I'm waiting for the train, just eating it without much thought whilst I'm doing something else. I can eat chocolate, but it needs to be the perfect circumstances. I need to be at home, sitting in a specific spot, maybe watching a movie. It needs to be really, everything around it needs to be nice. I can't just grab it, right? Because that would be a quote unquote waste. Again, so can you see how sneaky these behaviors and thoughts are, right? But this is a very, very typical eating disorder mindset and behavior. The amount of times I have spoken to clients where we talk about like fear foods and safe foods, etc., and they're like, I eat chocolate every day, right? And then I ask them, okay, so how would you feel grabbing a chocolate bar whilst you're waiting for the train? And then suddenly it's like, no. Because again, you have communicated to your body and brain that food, especially certain types of food, is a limited resource, which has put it on a pedestal, and then you're thinking it needs to be perfect in order for me to consume this. And this kind of focus on reward can also sometimes be challenging in recovery, because in the beginning of recovery, and also especially if someone is going through extreme hunger, right, food can be insanely rewarding and very, very fun. And you go to the grocery store and everything, it's like a theme park. You just go there and everything is so fun and exciting, trying new things, and you're very hungry, so you're able to eat a lot of things as well, right? It can be scary, but also it can actually be very fun. I don't think we speak enough about how fun extreme hunger can be. You literally have a brain, when going through extreme hunger, you literally have a brain that is wired to reward you for eating, right? For eating more, for eating certain foods, right? Extreme hunger has fun components to it. But then I also see that when someone gives in to extreme hunger, eventually what tends to happen is that extreme hunger lessens and food becomes less exciting. And this is often when people have a difficult time to kind of stick to it in terms of recovery. Because then they're thinking, but I don't really crave the chocolate that much anymore. I don't really care. So why should I eat it, right? And again, here we see the eating disorder start creeping in again. Because the eating disorder is comparing you to that time when food was super fun and rewarding and saying, the bar is set, so you must feel that way in order for food to be worth it, or in order for you to deserve it, it must be that fun. And if it's not, then you don't deserve it in the same way. But here's the truth. Food, including certain types of food, sometimes it's going to be more rewarding than others, and that is completely okay. You don't have to insanely crave a chocolate and be obsessed about that chocolate in order to deserve to eat it, right? You can literally just grab a chocolate because it was what was available and convenient when you were waiting for that goddamn train. And by not doing that, you are essentially putting chocolate on a bit of a pedestal, or you're kind of demonizing a bit to saying that this is some kind of food that I can't access freely. This is only a food when I can access when the timing is ideal or timing is right. Another example of how this behavior, this deer in headlights behavior in the grocery store can manifest is what I said with, focus on the nutritional content, right? Maybe you have your own specific rules about what kind of what kind of macronutrients are so-called good or bad. And what's funny here is that one person, two different people can have completely different rules about what is so-called good or bad. For example, one person can have a rule around fat, like everything they eat must be low fat and low fat equals good. Then another person may have the same thing, but about carbohydrates, right? So one person's safe food can be another person's fear food here. Typical examples in general is people eating disorder fearing things that are higher in calories, higher in sugar, and also higher in carbohydrates and /or fats. And then you may tell yourself, okay, well, I'm going to challenge the chocolate, but I'm going to find the lowest calorie, lowest fat, lowest carb, lowest sugar, blah, blah, blah version. And yeah, you may eat the chocolate and be proud of yourself. I don't want to dismiss it, the fact that you challenged it, but notice how you do with the caveat, right? There is the eating disorder that still is pulling the strings. The eating disorder is essentially saying, okay, yeah, we can challenge a little bit, but we're doing this on my terms. And what I would recommend in these situations, right, is you should not negotiate with terrorists. You should not negotiate with your eating disorder. If anything, think about what is your eating disorder saying and then do as opposite as possible. Your eating disorder is saying, oh yeah, let's choose the lowest sugar option today. Then choose one you know is high in sugar, or even better, just not even check the sugar content, right? Just choose one that you wanted. Don't even look at the nutritional labels. Because when you are doing challenges on the eating disorder's terms, again, your eating disorder is, you kind of teaching your eating disorder that, hey, yeah, you have power in my recovery. You have a word, you have a seat at this table. And the eating disorder is not really going to shut up then. Instead, opposite actions is absolutely key. Think about, what is the thing that my eating disorder would hate the most right now? Do exactly that. Don't negotiate with terrorists. So when it comes to nutritional labels, right, I really do understand that it can be a bit in your face sometimes, right? And I know that's really, really frustrating. And I know when you've seen it, you can't always unsee it. And also you may remember certain nutritional contents or calorie contents in your head. When it comes to calorie content, it's a little bit like a language, right? Essentially, you have memorized a lot of information and you can't just unmemorize it. But just like with the language, the less you use the language, the worse you become in it. Even if it is a language you know quite well. I lived in Spain and I was able to engage in some basic Spanish communication back then. Then I moved to Norway and then England, and my Spanish right now is, I can't really keep a conversation anymore. And the reason for that is that I did not work on keeping my Spanish alive. I did not engage in, conversation with Spanish people or read Spanish books or things that would have helped me maintain that knowledge. And the same thing goes with calories. If you are stopping engaging with that content and you may be like, yeah, I know the amount of this, but so what? And you stop engaging with it, eventually you'll notice you start forgetting it. And even more importantly, even if you know the content, right, you don't put any value on it. I still know that some foods are relatively high in energy and some foods are relatively low in energy, right? It's not that I'm getting sudden amnesia and I can't access that information at all. I have some basic knowledge of that. I don't remember the exact numbers of most things anymore, but I have the base knowledge, right? But it doesn't really bother me because for me that is just a random piece of information. And I got to that point by repeatedly acting as if it was a random piece of information, even when it really wasn't a random piece of information for me. Because trust me, when I was in recovery and I was choosing the crisp that I wanted instead of the lower calorie one, my eating disorder was so mad at me, but I knew that it was necessary to do it. I knew that it was necessary to choose what I wanted instead of what my eating disorder wanted. So basically the fake it till you make it strategy, making the decision against your eating disorder, it signalizes to yourself that, this calorie content is not an important piece of information. And you're kind of faking it till you make it, and then it becomes that way, right? Very, very strange. And it does take some time. So please don't feel like you're doing anything wrong if it's difficult. But overall, acting as if is a very, very helpful tool here. You don't need to wait until that piece of information no longer matters in order to make the recovery promoting decision, right? It's the opposite way around, opposite direction, where you make the decisions that, go against your eating disorder and goes with recovery. And by time, you notice that you go to the store and you don't necessarily think about which crisp has lower calories anymore, right? Because you have repeatedly acted as if that doesn't matter. I honestly think a a solid dose of deception can be helpful in recovery at times, right? Another typical example of how this like overwhelm and panic behavior in the grocery store can manifest is, you're wandering around there, you put the chocolate bar in the basket, and then you're like, oh my gosh, should I really have it? No, I should have the other one. And you panic. And again, it is that scarcity mindset, feeling like this is your one chance, rather than grocery stores being something you can go to plenty of days a week for the rest of your life. I mean, depending on where you live, but most people can access going to a grocery store, on a regular. Again, not everyone, but most people. And there are a few different strategies here that can be helpful. So one of them is I call it the floor is lava strategy. I use this with clients quite a bit, where essentially think that the nutritional label is lava. You can't look at it. Imagine that if you look at the nutritional label, your eyes start burning. And equally, think of it this way. When you put something in your basket, you have to throw it without looking at it, because you can't look for it too long, because your eyes are going to start burning. I know this seems so silly, but it actually is something that quite a few of my clients have said that, yeah, that was actually kind of helpful. And equally, try and think of it this way. When something is in your basket, you can't take it out, right? Make that little rule with yourself. Of course, if you genuinely got the wrong item or something, that's a different thing. But if you get that instinct, that the recovery part of you jumps out and is like, I should try and challenge that specific bag of crisps, and you take it and you throw it in the bag, don't let yourself listen to that part of your brain that's going to be like, oh no, you shouldn't do that because X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. Don't spend time overanalyzing nutritional labels, looking at the product. You see the product, try to look at it as little as possible. Take it, grab it quick, throw it in the basket, and when it's in the basket, it is there to stay. Because once you start engaging your brain and looking and analyzing and thinking, then your eating disorder is always going to find a reason why you shouldn't buy that thing, right? And very often the eating disorder will try and camouflage itself as logic, as recovery, right? And equally, it is completely fine if you buy that bag of crisps and maybe it was a little bit underwhelming, right? It was not a waste. It still was a challenge that you did, and that's good and great. The thing when it comes to nutritional labels and the value you put onto that, you can't really think yourself into, calories don't matter, it's silly to focus on it, right? I mean, to some extent you can do that. You can tell yourself that and maybe work a little bit. But at the end of the day, you have to act as if calories is a random piece of information that doesn't really have any value in order for it to get to that point. So basically, act as if, rather than trying to convince yourself before taking the action, right? That part comes after repeated action. I think this is where people often go wrong in recovery. They're like, yeah, I will challenge the crisps. I just need to read enough information about nutrition myths and anti-diet, blah, blah, blah. And then I will magically wake up one morning and feel ready, right? That is not really how it works. Yes, piece of information that highlights things such as fear-mongering around food and how there's no such thing as bad foods, etc., etc. Yeah, this can maybe in the moment give you that little bit of ease. But at the end of the day, it probably is going to still feel a bit wrong, and you got to do it anyways. And then when you keep doing it again and again, eventually it stops feeling wrong. It's kind of like if you're scared of dogs, can't just read enough articles about how nice dogs are, how sweet dogs are. You'll actually have to probably go to the dog park and stand in front of a dog for some time before that dog phobia lessens, right? I know I talk about exposure and why that's so key to recovery over and over and over. But it is for a reason, right? Because I see so many times people with eating disorders, they are prone to over-intellectualizing rather than acting, right? They're thinking, why do I feel this way? And reading, and they often know like more than most nutritionists and psychologists about eating disorders, about nutrition, etc., etc. Yet it doesn't necessarily always translate to behavior, right? I would say it's better to not know those things and act rather than knowing all the things and not acting. You don't need to have a PhD in anti-diet theory or to know every basic of nutrition in order to recover. If anything, that can be a bit of an anxiety behavior, right? Imagine someone who's scared of dogs and they're overanalyzing, reading about dogs and like, oh my god, dog bites, or no, but actually most dogs aren't biting, and they start over-engaging with that information as a way of easing themselves. Maybe it's better to, maybe just click out the Google tab and go out and gradually expose yourself to the goddamn dogs, right? Creating new experiences. That is exactly what it is about. When you guys listen to this podcast, I genuinely hope that you take this information and apply it rather than just intellectualizing it and being like, oh, another interesting piece of information to save in my brain. but I'm not going to act differently as a result. I really, really hope that you can implement this, right? That's genuinely my mission with this podcast. So overall, overwhelm when it comes to making food decisions, whether that is in the grocery store, and also it could literally be just in your own kitchen, not knowing exactly what you want, not knowing exactly what you crave, and then being overwhelmed and then being scared of making the wrong decision. These behaviors are so common when it comes to eating disorders, right? But what is important to remember is that there is an underlying scarcity mindset, an underlying perfectionism telling you that food needs to be perfect to be worth it. But the best way here is actually doing opposite actions. And interestingly enough, I will often instruct people to go buy that crisp that you don't even know if you like or not, just to kind of challenge that scarcity mindset that something needs to be perfect to be worth it. Eat that chocolate bar in the wrong surroundings, or quote unquote wrong surroundings. Challenge the idea that it must be perfect to be worth it, because food is always worth it. And recovery is always worth it. Recovery is not some special treat that you allow yourself to do on a good day if you've been good, right? That is not how recovery works. That's just the eating disorder. Recovery is something you do on good days, on bad days, when food is overwhelming, when food is scary, when food is fun, when food is really, really rewarding. Doesn't matter. You need recovery equally much on all of those days. Imagine if we only allowed ourselves to breathe when we were like in the middle of the forest and the air was really nice and fresh. No, you gotta breathe even when you're walking outside down a busy high street with gasoline in the air, right? You still need to breathe. Imagine if we only allowed ourselves to sleep when we had the perfect day and we were on a perfect level of tired, the bed was just feeling perfect, and everything was just, we could only allow ourselves to sleep when we had the perfect sleep and the perfect circumstances around the sleep. No, we have times when we struggle falling asleep, when we're feeling a little bit maybe too hot, too cold. It doesn't matter. We know that we need sleep anyways. We know we need to breathe anyways. And the same thing goes with food. We need to eat anyways. And the same thing also goes with recovery. We need to recover anyways. Recovery is every day, every meal. It is not a special treat reserved for quote unquote good days. You don't need to earn recovery. You deserve recovery and you need recovery. Don't let your eating disorder convince you otherwise. So I hope some of you will go to the grocery store, grab that goddamn chocolate bar that you've been craving for a while, or grab something random if you don't know what you crave. Throw it in the basket. Don't think, just do. If anything, you can even try and think, how quickly can I go to the grocery store, right? Maybe setting a bit of a time pressure can be helpful. For some it won't be, but for some, like being like, okay, I'm just going to run in and out and get the chocolate. That can also be helpful. And embrace food flexibility and it not having to be absolutely perfect. Okay? I'm going to answer a listener question. So this question is from Instagram. In my stories, I open basically ask box where I say, hey guys, do you guys have any specific listener questions or topic requests for my podcast? If you don't follow me already on Instagram, you can follow me at Amalia Lee or at letsrecover.co.uk. So the person is asking about the best books for eating disorder recovery, especially ones that explain the science behind everything. So here is my opinion when it comes to books about eating disorder recovery. My opinion and experience, having read a few, having started some, is that, I hate saying this, so many of them are just so goddamn triggering, where instead of being about recovery, it is about a recipe on how to get eating disorders, right? So I tend to say, be careful with memoirs. Memoirs? I don't know how to say that word. Be careful with like self-biographies, my story with an eating disorder. Don't get me wrong, some of these can be really, really good. There are stories where it is really empowering, it leaves out the most triggering details, and overall is a recipe on recovery rather than how to get an eating disorder. But unfortunately, that is not the norm when it comes to books about eating disorder. Very often it can be quite triggering, could be quite romanticizing. I remember myself when I was just starting my recovery, I know that there was this public figure that had recovered in my home country and had written a book, or I was thinking it was a recovery book. And I was like, yeah, maybe this could be a good part of my journey to read this book. It was so triggering, and I picked up more behaviors and ideas of behaviors, and I wish I'd never read it. And I think that there should be a genuine trigger warning. Because in my eyes, this was not a book about eating disorder recovery. This was a book day in my life as someone with anorexia. It was so triggering. So please be mindful with eating disorder books. But that being said, of course, because of this, I have to admit that I haven't really read that many because I got so put off how triggering they would be often, how romanticizing they would be, how they would just, again, it just made me kind of a little bit annoyed. And also, I think now, to be completely honest, I don't have that much interest reading books about eating disorders because it's already my job as I work with eating disorders, right? I don't really find the same interest in reading about it, to be completely honest. I'm very interested in reading studies, but books about eating disorders, I'd rather read a book about something completely different, right? So it's not work, right? Reading would be a bit of a time off for me to learn about other things. So right now, I do consume content about eating disorders, but it would be mostly scientific articles. Anyways, guys, one book that is really good and that a lot of my clients really enjoy, and just overall I've heard very good things about, I have the book myself, is Rehabilitate, Rewire, Recover by Tabitha Farrar. Please note, I'm by no means affiliated with Tabitha Farrar. I don't know her. I just think that it's a pretty good book because it explains a lot of the science behind things, right? And it is pretty no bullshit. One thing that frustrates me with a lot of eating disorder books, even recovery books, is that they kind of reinforce a lot of stereotypes and like unscientific ideas about eating disorders, like endlessly discussing, oh, control this, control that, oh, manifesting my pain externally. Yeah, I understand these things can play a role for some people, but it also can become a story people tell themselves rather than actually being the truth. You've been told so many times an eating disorder is all about control, and then you maybe ignore the part that actually restriction makes someone more obsessive, makes someone a bit more of a control freak, right? So again, we want to see what is the science here and what is just common theories that people have almost just accepted as truth when they are not necessarily set in stone. So yeah, Rehabilitate, Rewire, Recover by Tabitha Farrar. I got mine from Amazon. Sure, you can get it from there. Also just her website and podcasts and stuff is pretty good content. That's one I would recommend if you're looking for a bit more of a scientific approach and don't want all the fluffy stuff because, oof, there's a lot of fluff. But one thing that I want to remind you again, which I already have reminded you in this episode, is that at the end of the day, it is about action. You don't need to know all the science. It's good if the science, having some basic knowledge about why things happen, if that is enough to create those actions, right? If that's enough to be like, yeah, okay, I know that this is why things happen, therefore I will pursue and continue with my recovery. If it gives you that boost of recovery, then seeking out scientific information, very, very good, as long as it helps you act. If you notice that it becomes a way of you to postpone your recovery, where you're just endlessly collecting all sorts of information because you think that if you just collect enough information, you're going to wake up one day and suddenly feel ready to recover, then you're wasting your time and you would probably benefit more from focusing on action rather than reading another book, okay? Thankfully, Tabitha's book is kind of calling out this a bit, right? Okay, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode where I was covering a bit of food overwhelm and food decisions. I know that I did not get to cover everything or every scenario. It was more touching upon the topic from a wider perspective and mentioning some typical situations, but I may go more in detail about specific scenarios in the future. But overall, action, 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 okay? Okay, guys, have an amazing week, and I will see you guys in next week's episode.